Hi, I'm Devin.
And I'm Ida.
And welcome to Pandemic Chit Chat,
the podcast where we, two 8th graders, talk about the events of the pandemic through our eyes.
Throughout the past almost year of our lives, Ida and I have been doing school from inside of our home and missing out on many things.
Many 8th graders have shared similar experiences to us, and so we're here sharing a few of them.
This is Pandemic Chit Chat. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Pandemic Chit Chat. And this week's a very special episode because we have a guest, Ida. Do you want to?
Yep. So our guest this week is our English teacher, the lovely Miss Punwani. You can say hi.
Hi, everyone.
So today we're just going to be asking some questions about what it's like for a teacher to be going through online learning, teaching a subject that really related to today's world.
Okay.
And also navigating the pandemic as a parent and a teacher.
And we've obviously if you've heard our podcast before, we have given our insight on what it's like to be a student during a pandemic, and we want to get some different views of it. So, Ida, do you want to start?
Yeah. So back in March of 2020, what was your first reaction when you were told we were going online?
Well, at first I was surprised, but everything around me started to close. My daughter's school announced the day before DCPS did, her school system closed. And when I heard it, I said, we're not coming back. I automatically knew it. And I told the kids at my advisory, just pack your stuff, we're not coming back. And they're like, and they were freaking out because they were worried about the dinner dance of all things. They were very concerned about the dinner dance. And I was like, we're not coming back, but I'll see you soon. So, yeah.
And how are you doing now as opposed to then?
I mean, I'm doing okay. I mean, it's hard for teachers too to kind of keep working through this. I know, like Devin, for example, your class, like I'm always like trying to pull teeth getting them to talk, and it's kind of frustrating because at the very beginning, back in March, people were happy to put their cameras on. We were on Zoom. We could do all these like reactions and everything, which made it kind of fun. And it wasn't. I mean, for you guys it was intense, but for teachers it wasn't so bad because the way that our school did it was like we had an hour of teaching a day basically, and then we got to figure things out. It was 5 days a week, so there was a lot of prep that went into it for me, and I did because I talk too much. We taught the whole hour, and I was able to convert things really easily at first because we were doing debates and students had already done the work for the debates ahead of time, so we were able to debate online for the first 2 weeks, which bought me time. And over that spring break, I taught myself a bunch of platforms. I'm lucky because I'm really good at technology, and so I did teach a lot of my other colleagues. That was the hard part, is just like teaching everybody else how to use technology when they were not familiar with it, and then just over and over again showing them how to. I know a lot of teachers kept getting Zoom bombed and everything at the very beginning, and I was like, how did you do that? I mean, I have this set. They're like, oh, you have that set up? I said, yeah, no one Zoom bombs me ever. They're like, oh, okay. So it was such an interesting thing just going through that. But then now, I mean, it's been a long time online. In some ways, I've gotten really comfortable with the online and not having to get dressed up. And, you know, if my daughter, who's right behind me, is like, it needs me for something with help with math or whatever else, I can help her if it's not when I'm teaching. Lately, she's been getting a little bit more impatient, and she comes and pokes at me all during fourth period. I don't know, you know that. She pokes at me at A days and B's at fourth period and starts to, you know. So it's hard, but at the same time, you know, I know we're coming back. I'm kind of scared about it myself. But at the same time, you know, I'm excited to see kids again. People like, I really like teaching and I like seeing my students, and it's hard for your age group, I know, because you're such a social age group. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, I talked a lot. You did a lot of editing to do.
Just, I know we're all kind of scared going back. That was like many, many episodes of discussion. But we all, as 7th graders before we left, we all knew of WEU and all the 8th grade teachers. And I'm sure you guys maybe had a slight idea of who the rising 8th grade class was. Maybe not a lot, but well, how, like, the rising 8th graders this coming year. So be class of 2026. You've only known them as sixth graders. How does it feel that you're going to be teaching these eighth graders that you only know of as sixth graders?
Yeah, it's a little tricky because at least I knew, I know some of them. I was lucky because I coached debate last year. And so I knew a lot of students this year because of that. And I'd met them in person and I was able to joke with them. So a few I had been a debate team in sixth grade and I used to mess with them. And then now they've grown up a little bit and I knew who they are. Same thing, whereas some of the sixth graders, they had joined the team. And so I knew who are now seventh graders, they had joined. So I know them a little bit, but I'm coming in pretty blind, but every year we talk to the teachers before us and we ask about it, but it's gonna be different this year because, I mean, some students just didn't say anything or do anything. And so it's hard to know them at all. And I can say usually like I get to know my students pretty well. And I've gotten to know some people just because of, one-on-one conversations or they've shared something and then I'll follow up with them about what's going on. Or my Talent Time girls, I know them really well. But other than that, it's like, it's really hard to know students. Those little interactions you have in the hallway are so important. Or like even I used to sit out, what I usually do when the school year starts is I like to sit outside by the flagpole at recess and just chat with people randomly and have those kind of conversations or in the hallway. And I like to tease students a lot, which I feel like I can't do online because they don't understand. And I don't want to be really mean. And then I feel like I think we've all been kind of calmer though this year, teachers, because of the fact that we can mute people, which is kind of cool. At the same time, I wish I could really forcibly unmute people, but yeah.
Yeah, so Ida and I once talked about how there were, I think, two different ways we saw online school, I think, because the last 3 months of last year's school year and versus all of this year's school year were so drastically different for us. I feel like we enjoyed it so much more last year, and you can tell that kind of students were more into it last year, just because it was all new and stuff. And we of course had like a connection with our teachers already. So what do you miss about being in person the most, and how is your connection with the students, which you were talking about, how has that changed?
Well, I miss just kind of the entry into the classroom where I could kind of just look at a student and know if something was wrong. And I could have a sense of, or what their mood was. And so sometimes also those little interactions can help you change the mood of the student. Like when they come in, they could be upset because maybe another teacher was like really nasty to them or said something they didn't really like, or someone said something in the hallway. And if just a little interaction with them or a little joke or, teasing them a little bit might get them in a better mood. Whereas when their cameras are off and they're muted and I don't even know if they're there. I think I can tell when people aren't there, really honestly, because you're like, okay, you're not there, you've responded and I don't know, ever. And so that's really hard because I feel like I don't get to know them. And I feel like I also kind of had a reputation for the kids who were like the troublemakers. I used to love those kids. They would always get along with me really well, especially the boys. Like we get along really well. Yeah, probably because I tease them the entire time. And so we always have that connection. And I kind of miss that kind of thing with the kids who needed that extra support. I could be there for them. So that's hard. That emotional connection is really hard to miss as a teacher.
Are there any like academic connections that you're missing? I know you led the debate team, but I know as a student, and I say this in the most humble way possible, I get good grades, and so I haven't had to struggle with in person or online really, just trying to keep them up, but I know a lot of my classmates have. What support do you know of that you've given or other teachers have given out to those kids that are having a harder time, but like you can't see them?
Honestly, like some of those students, this format actually has worked really well for a lot of them, honestly, because we're not allowed to give zeros, which is okay. Like I have a lot less assignments. I learned after the first half of the year when I started getting all these assignments from every student. Like I swear, like I would get 20 assignments the day, like at the end of the quarter, and it was like, you didn't sleep at all for days and days on end. And now I've learned just to give less graded assignments. So with that, I can focus on quality with those students instead of quantity. So I do send out with those students, I send out regular emails to families or call. text all the time. I use like every kind of way of communication to let them know, okay, you're missing some things here, what's going on, and I can check in with them a lot more. Some students just like, they're just chosen not to do. And honestly, that's how it is in school sometimes too. Some students just choose not to do. I do say like um, in some things I might have changed the complexity. I listened to one of your podcasts too about, I listened to 3 of yours actually. And I was like, oh, okay, it's interesting. I listened to the one where you guys talked about this issue of like, you guys, school has come easier to you. You've been good students all along. It hasn't been that bad. Like you're not enjoying as much. You don't necessarily feel as challenged as much. I feel like on some things I have backed off on some of the rigor just to make sure that I could, I couldn't explain. Like I wanted to do debates really badly with everyone, but then I was like, oh my gosh, some people don't respond at all. And some people are into it, but then like, group projects as it is, like you never know who's going to do something, who's not going to do something. And it's always there's always one person that picks up all the slack. And so in a debate, you're supposed to have a partnership. And I said, I don't know how to partner people because there's just no way I can trust that one student's going to do all the work and the other one's going to be like dead weight on the end. So it's kind of hard. Some students too that have been thriving. I gotta say, some kids who have special needs, they're doing really well with the online environment because they can take breaks when they need to, and the fact that they can make up work later is good. Other students, I think some of them have needs that I can't help with. It's more mental health needs that there's a lot going on around them, and I try to explain this to adults around me because they don't seem to get it in this community I live in. I live in Arlington. It's like sometimes people I feel like don't understand like the needs of like a lot of other people. They're like, oh, what's the big deal? We should open schools again perfectly. I said, I have so many students I know who have had multiple family members die from COVID. And that is awful. And I have a student who just broke down to me last week who was just telling me how like she was scared out of her mind and she just kind of was unable to do anything because everyone around her was getting sick and she was so worried about her parents getting sick even though they're vaccinated because it's real. And so I guess for me, it's like, what, I can help those kids the best I can academically, but in a way it's good that we can't fail them or give them zeros because I want them to have the opportunity to try and get something and get their grades up to passing, because I feel like this year is kind of a year where we just learned how to be resilient, and that's what it's for. It's not about like becoming super smart or super, ready for everything, but it's a growth year for us as human beings because it's unprecedented. And, with climate change and everything, we don't know this won't happen again. And we're learning how to prepare and adapt. So I know I'm taking your questions and adding a lot more to them.
One of the things we did really want to talk about is the fact that our material, mainly To Kill a Mockingbird, and also learning about, social and racial justice and all that, is very, very similar and relevant during the pandemic. So my question was, how does it feel teaching those topics that are taking place in the past, but they're really relevant today, and you can kind of see what's happening and what we're learning also going on in the world?
Yeah, I try to make those connections on purpose. I feel like the curriculum I have, To Kill a Mockingbird specifically, is always relevant. And so is A Raise in the Sun, it's always relevant. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't, honestly. But I feel like every spring there's something that happens. There's something like there is a series of shootings, police shootings, or there is some kind of trial going on, or there is just another mark of injustice. And I just think that's just how things have been for so long. I feel like every year Taught to Kill a Mockingbird has been relevant to that. This year especially relevant, I guess, because we see the connections, with because of Black Lives Matter really blowing up more last year, because of George Floyd's murder, and because of the trial of Derek Chauvin, we can see the connections really clearly. It just happened to, when the trial happened to exactly coincide when we were doing that exact thing in To Kill a Mockingbird. So yeah, I've always loved teaching about social justice and talking about issues around what happens, because I came into teaching as a non-teacher because I spent a lot of time working in the world outside of it. And my husband's a journalist, and he, is also related to what's going on. So I like to connect my worlds from outside and have students really struggle with relevant issues and look at that through literature, and then look at it outside. So it's been fun to teach. It can be hard because some people have, I didn't realize how many people would be against justice. But there are definitely some people who have have kind of like just shut down a little bit, and listening to what's going on. But I think books are really relevant because they kind of push up those truths, and the ones that make us, I always tell you guys about banned books, like the ones that are most banned are the ones that are the most worth reading because they make people think and push. I'm actually excited because you're bringing this up now too, because we're going to be starting a project on Thursday, Friday, depending on your thing, where we're looking at the justice system a little bit more and thinking about what your version of justice would be. So it'll really relate to all the things you've been covering and synthesize all the things you guys have really been feeling in the last year without the COVID thing, but with the rest of it. So yeah.
And I also know that as hard as it is for us being, I guess, just students, you are doubling as both a parent and a teacher. Just how is it balancing trying to keep your daughter happy, doing well academically, and being there for your students if they need you?
Honestly, it was it's always been a balancing act anyway, even if I'm at school or here. And in some ways, it's like, in some ways things are easier when I'm with her because like when she gets sick or whatever, I can be like, here, stand next to me, and like, I can, hey guys, watch out, we're gonna go take her to the bathroom so she can throw up, which, sorry, but it's happened before during class. Or but in some ways it can be harder, clearly, because I hate the fact that my daughter's on the iPad all the time and I can't be with her, and I'd rather her be around other children. She's an only, which makes it really tricky too, because she doesn't have other kids to interact with right now, which makes it really hard. And then so she pokes at me all the time, like I said, during class. But uh, it's always a balancing act. And I think last year I wasn't really giving myself boundaries or setting my boundaries. And so I was letting students send me remind messages all the time or send emails or whatever else. And so I had to like just put down the line and say, okay, I'm going to help my students. I have these hours to help students, and I'm happy to help them during this time period, but I have to cut it off because my daughter deserves to have a mother who's like, spending time with her. So I definitely have cut that off. And I think that's part of also why I also trimmed down the number of assignments I grade per term, which I don't like usually doing, because I think in the law of averages, it's important to have a lot of assignments to, make sure that balances it out. But if you're going to have these grades where things you can't fail, like you can't, well, you're 50% your lowest grade, I feel like whatever, you can have less assignments and you can figure out how to fix those. So I've done that to make sure that I can handle the load a little bit better. I'm not outnumbered though, because I definitely have friends who, and there's a teacher that lives across the street from me who has 3 kids, and I can't imagine having that happening. So I mean, it's interesting because I see from both ends, and I understand the mental health component of a lot more of students because I've seen it with my daughter and some of the things that you guys are going through, she's gone through. And it's definitely bouts of depression, definitely bouts of I don't know, she had bouts of self-harm last year, and it was just trying to figure out how to balance it out. And I think also talking with my other colleagues who aren't parents, I just have to sometimes pull them back and say, hey guys, do you realize like the demands you're placing them are unfair? Let's talk about this. And so we discuss that a little bit more about like, okay, is this really something that a student can do in the amount of time they have? Because my goal is, if I want to get the heck off of here at 4:30, 5 o'clock, I want you guys off at 4. So that's just how it's going to be. So I think that's also a good thing. Like, just being a parent helps me empathize more with what students are kind of dealing with.
Yeah, for me, it's different because my brother he's 9, and it's definitely been very different for both of us because he's declined in like participation and stuff. And obviously, especially for the younger kids, like you said, like being social isn't on, it's like, find your words, it's like a necessity because your brain is still developing, and all your skills are still developing, and so not just school. And I talk to so many people, and they're like, well, the one thing, school, a lot of people kind of saw school as like this burden, like, oh, school, I have to go to school. But one of the best parts was you could see friends, and you could interact, and you can work together, you can like build all these, a social life. And now you're not really building that online with online school. And a lot of students, I know I've like declined in like mental health as well, because it's a constant routine. It's constantly logging on, logging off, class to class, work. but there's also been, I don't know, just even when I'm outside of school, I find myself really frustrated with what's going on. And I would want to go back to school. That's like a personal preference. I know not everyone wants to, and I can't speak for anyone else, but how do you feel about, like, I don't know, just online school has presented like a lot of challenges, and how do you feel you've overcome some challenges, and some challenges are still like still playing out, and they might not even be fixable at this point?
Well, I definitely agree with you. Like I had thought that, if I put, because usually in middle school, you want to put students in groups as much as possible because like you learn best from your peers and you're not going to really listen to us. If you look at developmental psychology for middle school students, it's basically we should treat you guys like you're in like a summer camp all the time because your brains are just growing in weird ways and you're in a really weird phase of your development. And then once you go to ninth grade, you start teaching again. Um, and like learning again properly, but like you're just going through so much because hormones and like just change, and your brain is actually growing the same way it did when you were 6, like the frontal cortex. That's why people lose their organizational skills, and memory and everything is because of your brain. So if your parents ever ask, what's going on with you, why are you a mess? Why, my brain is growing. My frontal cortex is growing. So I've been trying really hard this year to like use breakout rooms a lot because I was hoping that like if I use breakout rooms and people have a chance to interact and they can talk and maybe they can talk informally too, and that would be great. But then like, okay, back to your class, Devin, it's like I put people in there and no one says anything. And it's like, oh my gosh, no one is speaking. What is going on? And then it's the only class I had that was completely silent in all the rooms. I'm like, because everyone's, I think they're fiercely competitive or they all want to work by themselves. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on in here. And then in other classes, people are chatting happily. In other classes, people are just staying on the work. So that's really killed me because I don't like quiet classrooms. I'm one of those weird teachers who cannot stand quiet. It just bothers me. So I like to have always some slight rumbling in the background. So it's kind of weird. And I feel like I'm talking to myself a lot or holding a seance. When I'm like, hello, are you there? Ida, are you there, Ida? And then I feel like, I'm asking these questions of you all the time and they're not there. So it's hard. And then I've been trying to overcome things by like lately I've been into the riddles. So I give like silly riddles and like, let's just start this off. And like, we have something crazy or whatever, like just bad riddles, good riddles, whatever. And I think it's more fun to start that way. So we can start off and people can be like, oh, this isn't like heavy stuff I have to start with after being on all day. And I've also been playing with that Pear Deck because I'm just totally in love with it, even though my free trial ends in like 8 days. And I'm very, very sad. But I really enjoy giving students the ability to anonymously respond to things. It's anonymous to everybody else, but I can see who's responding, which is nice. So I can see also what's going on and it tells them the mood and everything, which I think is really cool too. So I can know if someone's got a big frowny face on that they're having a bad day and maybe I should lay off them a little bit that day, or maybe we're in a small group, I can interact with them a little bit. But it's hard because like I do miss, again, like being around kids and seeing those facial expressions and knowing what's going on. But I guess my workaround is like having students self-identify on those kind of things. And I have seen increased engagement since I started the riddles and Pear Deck, from some students especially. So I'll keep trying to figure out different ways. I know their teachers are great. Miss Monticelli always talks about what she's doing and like movement oriented. Yeah. And I wish like English wasn't so like heavy that I couldn't have to be like, oh yes, we can just dance around and eat stuff. I said we can't really do that in English as much. But I'm always trying to think of ways to do that. Even in class, like we're in person, I try to figure out ways that we can incorporate movement into it. Because again, middle school should be like summer camps or moving and doing things because you guys are fidgety and I am too. That's what I actually hate the most about online teaching is sitting down on my butt all day. It's just, I don't know how you guys do it in classrooms, but I'm used to like teachers walk like crazy. I usually have like, 20,000 steps by the end of the day because I've walked and done my workout and stuff. And now it's like, oh, man, my legs hurt. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Just like a side note, I love the Pear Deck mood check thing. I sent an email a while ago just about student mental health at Hardy because, like Devin was saying, and in my experience, my mental health has not been great this past year. And we have we've worked on it, all that, but we're in a tough time. You can work on it, but everybody's sort of rocky right now. And I love teachers who are extra considerate and put mood checks either on Pear Deck or like Miss Monticelli does it. She goes through the entire list of students and asks everyone how they're doing. So yeah, I love that. And we've been talking for almost half an hour. So maybe we can maybe each ask one more question. And so my question would be, what advice do you have for, I guess, our class who the school year ends in 5 weeks? Like, we're going off to high school, which is crazy and I can't believe it. But what advice do you have?
I would say I would just take this year as for what it is. Like I said before, it was a learning experience for all of us. It was adjustment. I think my advice to you is to celebrate yourselves. You have been resilient. You have been brave. You have learned how to adapt to all kinds of different things. Heck, I'm sure a lot of you have improved your typing speeds a lot, which is great. So think about all the things you've done and achieved in this last year. A lot of you have picked up a lot of cool hobbies, and just celebrate yourself, because I think it's so easy to be hard on ourselves all the time. And I think, especially in this world where everything's ultra competitive and we must do this, we must get ahead, we don't take a second to stop and thank ourselves for what we've done. So I think that my best advice to you is to appreciate yourselves, to thank yourselves for, still being here, still chugging on, and realizing that next year high school begins. It's a new chapter. However, you've learned so much that you can take on the world. So.
I don't think I have anything else. Thank you for thank you for letting us interview you.
Yeah, thank you.
I was flattered. I was like, this is so exciting. I told my husband, I'm like, I listen to all their podcasts.
That was this week's episode of Pandemic Chit Chat. We really hope you liked hearing a new voice and not just our voices for the past 10 weeks.
We're going to continue interviewing, anyone we can find, anyone who wants to sit and talk and listen to us.
Add some spice.
Add some spice to the podcast. So, okay. We will see you later. Bye.